She got pregnant, but not from me. It was 2011 when me and my ex-wife, at the time girlfriend, decided to come to a different country temporarily, mostly to have an international experience, to learn languages, cultures, etc. We spent part of 2011 and most of 2012 studying languages and working, until we had to go back to our home country due to a member of the family passing away. Also at that time, we got married, but just on paper. We didn't have any parties or ceremonies since we didn't have any money to spare. Studying abroad is very expensive. During the time we spent back home, we took several steps towards building a couple's life or a family, such as refurbishing my old apartment, buying furniture. We even received several gifts from friends because they were so excited that we decided to stay. At least, that's what I thought. Rebuilding the apartment was a saga by itself. In order to be able to provide, I created from scratch a real estate agency with my mom. We worked really hard and I was working a lot, which is a good thing. Because of that, I was able to finish the apartment, bought the ex a car, and bought myself a motorcycle. We had good friends and good people around us. Besides some minor things, I was living the life. On a note here that I almost forgot, her mom, my ex-mother-in-law, helped us with the apartment, as she was also excited for us. She paid for all the cabinets and all the paint jobs. This will be important later. It was mid-2013 when she started to complain about our home country and our current life. I couldn't understand it. From my point of view, everything was great. We had a great life and a great future. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to go back to the country and city that we visited as students in temporary residence. At first, I refused. I had a vision, a glimpse of the future. My business was doing great, and we had our family and friends around. She wanted more. She wasn't satisfied with all that, even though she was also becoming very successful in her line of work. So she gave me an ultimatum. We either emigrate as a couple, or she would do it alone. Of course, I gave up on everything I had, packed up my stuff, and emigrated with her. Of course, it's not that simple to emigrate. Her and I were both law bachelors. Our diplomas weren't accepted for immigration. So one of us had to come as a student and the other as a worker. So we made an arrangement. I took all the money I had and paid for the travel and first semester costs, as for first expenses, furniture, etc. She transferred her car to her mom's name so she could sell it and send us the money to pay for school. She would work, and I would study full-time. She was doing exactly what I did for her while we were back in our home country. I was working and covering most of the expenses, and she was training and studying. But this time, I was studying. She was covering most of the expenses. But I was also helping, as I rented my apartment and still had some revenue from the agency. One of the first things we did after arriving was finding a place to live. We put some furniture in and opened a joint bank account. I'd like to take the time to also explain that I wasn't just naive. I was also very, very young at the time. She was just a half year older than I was. We found an apartment almost immediately, as we had friends living in the same building. We became door-to-door neighbors. It was great. Our friends were also a couple, and from the same country that we were from, so naturally we spent a lot of time together. The first 2 or 3 months were nice. I was studying, she was working, I was enjoying my studies. We were already talking about the future, such as next steps on the immigration process, about next steps in our life, having kids and such. I was adamant on having kids only after the whole immigration process was done, as we would be able to afford it, and our future in this country was uncertain. She agreed. During that time, we would throw some LAN parties as we were both gamers. I'd cook, we'd drink and play games. It was great. Most of our friends were gamers too, as we both used to work on a game testing company back in 2012, and she was still working the industry to that day. She invited a couple of coworkers for one of those parties. They seemed to be nice people. I even gave one of my winter jackets to one of her friends, who we'll call Dick, short for Richard, of course. Winter here is pretty intense, and Dick didn't have any winter clothes, so I gave him the spare jacket I had. From time to time, we would go out with her coworkers, all couples, except for Dick. I was never comfortable with him. I never liked him, but I would tolerate him as he was part of her group of friends. She would always complain about stuff he did or said. At this point, I started to see the signs. I started to become depressed as the distance between us grew bigger each day. I tried to fight for our marriage, but it seemed like she didn't care. The only thing that I could think about was all the bits, pieces, and situations we had to endure to get to where we were. I thought about our families, our friends, all the gifts and wishes that we received, all the good deeds from people that helped us. Why would she throw this away? My depression grew bigger. I became super focused on my studies and on my crafts. I was alone most of the time as my thoughts ate me alive. I tried everything at this point, and I was becoming exhausted. One day, she comes home after work and goes for a walk with our neighbor's wife. I knew it was coming. She broke up with me when she got back. I was never a guy that would easily cry, but I cried like a baby that day. When I was a bit calmer, I called my parents. That made me cry even more because I missed them so much. I went to bed crying, couldn't sleep, and ended up crying throughout the whole night. The next morning, I had a panic attack during class. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. My vision was blurry. I could barely walk. I went to the infirmary, and there wasn't anyone there. I really thought that I was going to die that day. I laid down on the couch there and passed out. I woke up to the nurse assessing me, and I got the assurance that I was physically fine. I went home that day and stayed there, typed the divorce documents, signed it, and just stayed there, doing nothing, just thinking. That day was the very last time that I saw my ex. A few days passed by, maybe 3 or 4, and I woke up to a weird dream that I had. During my dream, my neighbor's wife was telling me that my ex was expecting a baby girl. I had another panic attack. During that same day, I found out that she was already official with Dick. A friend in common texted me the details since they both deleted and blocked me from social media. She never admitted to cheating on me to anyone, but she was already pregnant at that time, and it wasn't mine. That same day, I got a call from the bank saying that my ex signed the papers to close the account and that I needed to go there to sign it too. The bank account was empty. She even had the audacity of texting me to ask for money for rent and utilities. Besides the $60 I had in my wallet, that was all the money I had left. I was livid and desperate. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, my parents were able to send me a couple $100s, and that's what I used to move out. I offered her to buy me out of the apartment, meaning that she would buy my half of the furniture, and she got offended. We never talked again, as I was livid. I changed my phone number and deleted and blocked all means of communication with her. I was able to move out, to the worst place I ever lived in, with all my furniture using the money that my parents sent. But I have to admit, I was eating just once a day because I didn't have the money to do anything else, and I was way too ashamed of my naivete and situation to ask for more help. During that month, I noticed the number of friends I had on my social media was decreasing. I asked around and found out that for each group of friends that we had in common, she told a different story and a different lie, all to her favor, of course. They went from, he's impotent, to, I was afraid that he was going to kill me. I understood that she was trying to justify what she did to me to keep her friends and justify the cheating. Of course, it pissed me off, but what really got me flabbergasted is that some people actually believed her. People that I once considered family believed that I was capable of doing such things. It really broke my heart again. Some of our friends in common didn't buy her lies and texted me saying that it's clear what happened, and I wasn't capable of the actions she was telling everyone. I was livid. I think I was never that angry before or after in my life, but in the end, I did nothing about it. I came to the conclusion that the people that believed her without talking to me were never really my friends, regardless of my feelings or consideration towards them. I also had bigger problems in my hands. How was I supposed to pay for my studies now? The time to pay up the school was coming, and I had no idea what to do. Nevertheless, my ex-mother-in-law texted me asking me to pay her up for the cabinets and paint job that she paid for in my apartment. Basically, she was asking me to pay her back for a gift, but fine, let's do it. I explained to her what was going on with me, all the details, the slander, how her daughter and I had an agreement, that I was only in this situation because of what she did to me, how she did it, and that she got all my money. And that, after hearing all of it, if she still wants to be paid, that I would find a way to pay her back even if it takes my whole life to do it. The only answer I got was, oh, never mind that then. I loved my ex-mother-in-law as a true member of my family, and I still only have positive feelings towards her. I remember it like it was yesterday, the day that a miracle happened in my life. I was actually in a calculus class trying to figure out how to pay the school, calculating what I could and could not do, when I received a message from my sister. A company that owed me money finally paid up. I had no hope whatsoever on collecting that money. They paid up the exact amount that I needed. It was during my most financially desperate time that they decided to pay. I can only consider this a miracle. What are the odds? I hope none of you ever experienced this amount of frustration, desperation, and anger that I felt ever in your lives, and I mean it. I decided to go out that weekend to celebrate with a couple of friends where I could tell them the whole story of what happened until that point. It was an interesting experience. As I was telling them, the whole bar started to listen to my story. I've never had free drinks from strangers before. That was the very first and last time. I noticed a couple of friends were really uncomfortable. One was drinking like there was no tomorrow. I asked what was going on. Then, my neighbor's wife said, "I'd like to tell you something, but I promised not to tell." It was the exact situation I dreamed of. My body became cold, and I said, "I think I know what you're talking about." I continued, "She's pregnant, and it's a girl." "How do you know?" she asks. "I had a dream where I dreamed of this very moment," I explained. Everyone was surprised, of course. My friend that's drinking like there was no tomorrow sighs in relief. "At least I don't have to break my word." He told me that he was drinking like that because he wanted to tell me, but didn't know how. From then on, the only thing I knew is that X and Dick moved to his home country, and they were living with his parents. She didn't speak the language, but I guess she learned it by now. She indeed had a baby girl, and I know nothing more about that. I had several hardships over the past few years, but ended up graduating in winter semester of 2016 as one of the best students of that class, and I was invited to be salutatorian, which I accepted. I got a couple of jobs after school, but ended up working in the gaming industry again, where I was just promoted. I'm still waiting on my immigration process that hopefully will be done in the first semester of 2020. My story continues. I licked my wounds and have a bunch of scars, but I'll keep going, keep fighting for the bright future I know I can have. I'm much more mature now. I know who I can trust, and I know that I owe so much to my friends and family for the support they gave me. I hope you can take inspiration on this part of my story. Keep fighting and persevering as I did. My brain tumor story. My name is Brandon, and I'm from Australia. Most of my life as a teen, I was very skinny, the eat anything and not gain weight kind of skinny, and suffered from really extreme headaches to the point where I would get home and close the blinds and lay on the couch kind of headaches. I had them for about 5 years straight, and I had seen maybe 4 different doctors, and none of them helped me, but instead gave me painkillers and sent me home. I was now 18 and weighed 48 kilograms, or roughly 108 pounds, and still having severe headaches, so I went to see the new doctor in town, as it was a small town. We got new doctors sometimes. He had suggested maybe getting a CT scan, which scared the S out of my mom, but I really didn't know what that meant or what to expect. So we fly to the city, which is an 18-hour drive or 1-ish hour flight. We got the CT scan, effing loud machine. When we met with the doctor, he said that I had a growth in my brain, which made my mom start to cry. And I kind of just sat and really didn't say anything. And the doctor started making phone calls to surgeon, which upset my mom even more. Fast forward maybe 2 weeks. It was no longer referred to as a growth, but after another CT, they said the type of tumor was a non-cancerous one, which was amazing news. Probably the best news we had. But it was a pituitary gland brain tumor, which wasn't good. The pituitary gland controls a lot of hormones and a lot of other important things in the body. So I'm getting ready to have surgery, and I'm not really nervous, more kind of excited to get it out, but of course, things could go wrong. The pituitary gland is also attached to the optic nerve, which is connected to my eyes. So it turned out I had lost part of my eyesight over the past few years, but it was so slow, I didn't actually notice. So the old way they would do the surgery is they would crack open the skull and do it that way. But they had a new way of doing the surgery, which is to go through the nasal cavity, up to the skull, drill a hole through the skull, remove the tumor, and then would take a skin graft of some tissue and cartilage from inside the nose and would make a wall to cover up the hole. And because of the new way they do this surgery, they have a higher chance of removing all of the tumor and not having to go back and remove more. There was always a chance because of where mine was that obviously I could receive brain damage or go blind or, worst case, die. When I woke up, I was so effing high on morphine. I was seeing triple everything because my optic nerve had been stretched from the tumor, and I had tubes everywhere, but I could see my parents next to me and some doctors. Anyway, I pass out. A week goes by after coming in and out of my high morphine state, and I get moved to a ward block with my own room, which is like first class compared to the ICU. I sleep and watch TV for another week with my triple vision, which was horrible, but eventually it started to subside. My vision came back, but my peripherals never came back, which was in 2015, and I still haven't gotten it back to this day. But I didn't suffer any brain damage. I did have really bad damage to my pituitary gland, which could be fixed with meds that I still take and probably will for the rest of my life. I'm all good now. I take meds, but I'm healthy. I gained a bunch of weight, so I wasn't very skinny anymore, and I didn't have any more headaches, which was a weird time in my life because I had a lot of anxiety and depression for a few years. But I eventually got to a point where I wasn't so sad, but still had a lot of anxiety every time I got a headache or something didn't feel right. But I'm getting better at dealing with it. This is the first time I ever told anyone about it, but I'm bored, so here it is. I hope you liked it. My life so far. I grew up in a family of 5. I was the middle child. I was never loved by either of my parents, neither the one contracted out to Iraq, nor the one raising me at home. This was just a biased conclusion of mine, resulting from confrontations and conversations with the both of them. I was raised in a Lutheran family, not that it matters. My life has never really had anything to do with what lies above. My best friend since I remember was raised in a crack house. Also not that it matters, since no outside individual has had that much of an effect on my life. Until then. I went to private schools, funded by my hardworking parents, until I decided I wanted to switch over to public high school at that level of education. Up until high school, I was always obedient and never raised any red flags with my parents. Mostly my mother, since she was the sole parental figure in my life. Father was always deployed or contracted out to a foreign country. Once high school hit, I was the typical loser at the start. Since I didn't know much of the teenager life considering my upbringings in the private schools. I had known nothing aside from Bible banging and the seasonal soccer games. From my fairly tall for my age and quite stocky, my brain led me to joining the football team, where I learned many valuable lessons of teen puberty, which are in no need to be mentioned. I went on to find a liking to running the distance races, 1 and 2 mile, in track and field that year of high school, where I then decided that next year I would join the cross-country team instead of the football team. I found to like my slimmer, handsome body that came with being on the cross-country team, and decided to continue the trend by joining the swim team. This trend of handsome body forming led females to me. As females were a fairly new discovery to me, I found it quite interesting. And so, the first and possibly the only love of my life came along. It would be a lie to say that I don't remember every single encounter I ever had with her. She simply astounded me with every confrontation I had. I first saw her in the hallway, very typical of a first love from high school. She was wearing a beautiful white cardigan, blue jeans that were so tight to complement her oh-so-beautiful tight bottom, her hair straightened to the lower part of her back, and to top it off, the white trash sneakers indicating her trailer park livelihood. For whatever reason, I couldn't pass up my first sight of this beauty. My first passerby action on her went simply like this. "What is your name?" Followed by the answer of April. And she continued on her journey to whatever class she was scheduled for. My heart damn near exploded asking that question, never being so nervous for anything up to that point in my life. As every classical high school love novel goes, I pursued my interest in her, being as beautiful as I thought she was. I didn't say a word to April for months to follow. I only passed her in the hallway, nervously thinking of what I should say. One day came where I decided to ask her to attend a school play with me, and by God, it somehow worked. April said, "Yes, I will attend the school play with you." It was something lame like Robin Hood. I had no intentions of giving the play my attention. I had all eyes, 2 of them, on her. April and I, mostly April, had a splendid time at the play. So much that she decided to join the high school actor and actress group, whatever it was named. Regardless, April and I soon became that ordinary boyfriend-girlfriend you see at school every day, kissing at the locker, walking one another to class. April and I had many memorable events that I would love to share, but I don't have the patience to share. It all seemed to end in an instant, and high school was over. Fun was forever gone, never to appear in my mind again or ever happen again. As soon as high school was over, I proposed to April. She said yes. We had a white trash wedding at the courthouse with only our best friends in attendance. Soon thereafter, parting ways to go to separate colleges. In a few explainable events, my parents were soon both led to suicide. I then found never to be the answer. With my somewhat financial stability gone, I turned to joining the military. I joined, went to the military's basic training, and was then sent off to Germany without leave. Upon my arrival in Germany, I instantly called my lovely wife to tell her of my oh-so-wonderful experiences in basic training and others up to my arrival in Germany. She sounded so effing heartbroken while talking to me. As I had previously told her that it didn't matter where I went, I wanted her to finish out her degree prior to reuniting with me. Soon enough came, as the summer season does. She and my only sibling were to come and visit me where I was stationed. They were to come on a plane June 3rd and stay until the 24th of the same month. Early on the morning of June 3rd, my wife April and my sister Denise were on the way to the airport. A drunk driver crossed over the median, killing both my only living family and my beloved wife. Here I am, on the second Christmas, without a family to belong, finally bringing my story to the public. Think running from the police is scary? Try swimming. It was summer break in 2010. Me and my friend Aaron were spending the day at the lake and stopped in to eat at a small restaurant close to the beach where we were going to. Aaron gets my attention and points at two really hot petite girls wearing short cutoff shorts and tank tops ordering food. They look wild and fun. We kept glancing over at them and then decided to get the balls to go talk to them when we finished eating. We asked if it was cool to sit next to them and they said, "Go right ahead." Everything we say, they laugh at, and they seem interested in us. I mostly locked eyes with the brunette, Brianna. She was shy and was giving me the "I want you" look, while the blonde, Chelsea, was more into Aaron. They were 16 and 17, just like me and Aaron. They invite us to go cliff jumping with them, and we respond with, "Hell yeah." We pile into my Civic, and the first thing one of them says from the back seat is, "Do you all smoke weed?" I say, "Maybe, why do you ask?" "Because your car smells like a pot factory, dude. Do you have any?" I tell them I have one joint and a roach. They giggle, and Chelsea says, "Stop by my grandma's house up the road and I'll grab my party supplies before we go." So I drove them there. A few minutes later, they come out with a big beach bag wearing the same outfit but with their shorts unbuttoned, exposing their bikini bottoms and having their hair fixed more. "Gosh darn," says Aaron to me. We agreed we were in for a fun time, and I slipped 3 condoms from my glove compartment to my right shoe. We got vodka, Pepsi, some more weed, and an extra something for us. My brother hooks me up when I want. We park at the beach and follow them to the spot. Had to walk about a quarter mile down the road and sneak through people's yards and head down the trail in the woods, enjoying the view of their backsides bounce with each step. After seeing no trespassing signs, I ask them what happens if we get caught, and they tell us a lot of teens come down here to party. They just try and keep them out. We reach the cliff spot, and it's very secluded. The girls strip down to their bikinis, and I wonder how the heck I'm supposed to hide my erection in my swimming trunks. They tell us before we get effed up that we have to check for rocks in the water so we don't end up dead. We followed them down the cliff and grabbed a really long branch to help them check. As long as we jumped about 6 feet out, we were safe from the cliff drop. As soon as they reach the top, they both jump without telling us, and Aaron looks down and says, "F no." They climb back up and laugh at us and tell us they'll show us their tees if we jump. They raise their bikini tops, and we jump in with our jaws dropped. The wind sounds like a tornado, and then I see pitch black when I hit the water. I swim up towards the sunlight and gasp for air. They woot for us and jump down to join us. Chelsea swims to Aaron, and Brianna swims to me. We splash each other and climb back up to the top. Brianna smacks my backside and tells me to climb faster, and I let her in front of me so I could smack hers and mock her. We reach the top and decide to break out the good stuff. Chelsea rolls up a joint while Aaron lights up ours, and Brianna passes me the cotton candy vodka after she takes a swig. Me and Aaron sat impressed watching the girls chief on the roach until it burnt their fingers. We talk and laugh, and Chelsea pulls a small baggie out of her cigarette pack and asks if we've ever done coke. We lie and say a few times, and they snort the first lines off her makeup mirror and pass it to Aaron first. I take my first snort nervous as heck. A rush of awesomeness pours through my head like a dam being opened to fill an empty river. Like I just scratched off the numbers to a winning lottery ticket. They grab our arms and make us get up and make us run with them to jump again. This time, the fear was gone, and it was a pure adrenaline rush. The girls whisper to each other on the climb back up, and they tell us we're doing belly button shots. So we slurp shots from their pierced belly buttons, and they did ours in a much more sexual way with a slow lick. After joint number 2 and another coke bump, one thing led to another, and Brianna was riding me like a rodeo bull standing waist deep in the water below the cliff. I didn't even say, "Let me grab a condom," after she wrapped her legs around me and was dry humping me with her tongue in my mouth. With the orange light from the sunset glowing on her beautiful face, it was on. After we finished, Chelsea asked if we were okay down there, laughing at us as we climbed back up. Aaron was pulling up his shorts, catching his breath with a smile like I'd never seen on his face before. We started passing the bottle again, and the sound of a CB radio echoed through the woods. I look over and see a flashlight and panic. We hide everything, and a sheriff and another officer walks up the path to us. "You kids having a good time? We got some noise complaint from the folks who own this property." Aaron says we will leave, sir, and he walks closer to us. Are you smoking a little pot?" I look at the others frozen as I was going to say, "No, sir." He grins and says, "What are y'all's names?" Chelsea asks if we're in trouble, and he tells us that we're trespassing on private property and asks to check her bag. We all look at each other and blurt out, "Run!" and we all run and jump down to the water. I rose up to the surface and made sure they all followed me and started swimming like an Olympic swimmer towards the other side of the lake. Stop, 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 we will find you. He starts shining his flashlight at the water, and we go under every time it shines on us. We make it to the other side and start climbing up the muddy bank, sinking knee-deep with each step. We lay on the shore, catching our breath after the 2 football field-length swim. Chelsea tells us she left her wallet and phone in my car with the rest of ours. Thank God. We look across the top of the cliff at the flashlights and get up and start running through the woods barefoot. We crouch down by a fallen tree and catch our breath again. Talking about how we are from the cocaine and weed in her bag they are looking through right now, we decided to start swimming towards the parking lot along the shoreline. After about 30 minutes of swimming, we see a boat coming towards us with a spotlight and swim to a huge fallen tree in the shallow water to hide. They slow down and shine the light everywhere. I hold Brianna and calm her down from crying and wait for it to pass. When it does, we slowly move down the shore with just our heads out of the water. After over an hour, we swim across the lake again and sneak up the hill to the parking lot. Thank God there were other cars parked there from the campsite next to the beach, or my car would be quite obvious. I get my keys from the gas tank door and drive the girls home. I tell Brianna my number and she puts it in her phone, and Chelsea did the same for Aaron. We were stupid for not getting their numbers because they never called or texted us. We didn't even ask for their last names and spent hours looking for them on Facebook. We didn't find them. I pulled out and would have expected Brianna to call me if she were pregnant. We drove to her grandma's house a couple weeks later, and no one was home, so we decided to leave them alone. To this day, me and Aaron have laughs about that night when our wives aren't around. Hopeless. The alarm rang. 6:30 a.m. He turned it off and looked up at the ceiling. Am I living or surviving, he thought. After all, working 12 hours a day and going to college on the remaining time is not much of a life. I managed to get up after some time. He checked the time on his phone. 6:53. He's going to be late again. His boss will complain about him. This is a bad day after all, maybe the worst of the year, he talks to himself as he gets ready to leave without any emotion. He manages to get out of the house eventually. His house is 4 minutes from the bus stop. Time is around 7:20. He's not running because the bus goes around 7:28 at that stop. Just when I'm getting to the street, the bus goes by. It's too far to make it running. It's hopeless anyway. He's starting to think he's going to get busted, and he's starting to think about it. He starts thinking about why he does this, why he cares. He works at a crappy job that barely pays the bills anyway. His boss is the devil in person. The company buys the workers for $3 an hour and sells them for $15 an hour. He knows it. His position has access to such reports. Every time he remembers that the boss's son is his coworker, and he receives better wages than him and doesn't do anything, he gets even more demotivated. He looks at his hand. He looks at his hands and thinks, I'm only here for her. If not for her, I would have left this planet already. He looks around. The bus stop got crowded without him noticing. He looks to the left, and the bus is coming. 7:44. His shift starts at 8 o'clock, and he's only taking the first bus. There's 2 more to go after this one. The bus stops. He gets in. Bus is crowded. The rest of the people get in too. The bus feels like a tuna can. He observes his surroundings. There are people talking and laughing, people on the phone texting. Everyone seems so happy. Even the bus is at least 1 double maximum capacity. He sneaks his hand into his backpack. It's a hard task since he can barely move his arms. He grabs his headphones, plugs them in. Life gets 2% better. He does not hear the useless talking now. He's isolated. The bus arrives at the terminal. He rushes towards the next one. Just as before, another tuna can. It's midwinter. He left home with 2 coats. However, the amount of people produces extreme amounts of human heat. He's sweating already. He takes off the coats as he walks onto the bus. It's 8:03 already, and he's far from work. He's gotten to a point where he doesn't care anymore. Today is a bad day after all, just like yesterday. Time goes by. The bus leaves the terminal at 8:10. He is 10 minutes late already. The bus leaves only to stop a couple of meters ahead. Traffic. Intense traffic. It's peak hour. The city's grown insanely in population in the last 10 years. No roads were planned. Average speed is 20 kilometers an hour. His bus needs to cross the city to get to the other terminal. He feels like a gasoline doll. The bus starts and stops every 50 meters. His body waves left and right. This goes for about 30 minutes when he finally makes it to the other terminal. 8:40 now. He goes to where the last bus stops, looks at the board for the bus schedule. Last one left 8:35. Next one is 9:15 a.m. He's not mad, not sad. He does not feel anything at all. He feels empty, with zero motivation and will. He sits and waits, watching people go by. There he is, an empty human being watching other empty human beings rushing towards their work just as he is. Maybe I shouldn't complain that much, is the thought that revolves around his mind. He just snaps out of his thoughts, gets a piece of paper and a pen, and then starts drawing the terminal structure. He starts with the pillars, big black metal bars, then proceeds to the ceiling, metal bars installed in some kind of web shape. There are iron bars everywhere. He draws the signs. His bus arrives. He checks the time and it's 9:13. He hops inside the bus and gets a seat. This is the only bus that does not feel like a pressure cooker. He gives a small smile and remembers that he is hungry. Maybe that's why he made so many analogies with food. The bus starts and leaves the terminal. He's almost to hell. How I meet again. So I don't really know how to title this. Let me just begin. Back when I was a kid, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I loved it there till I was in the 6th grade. I moved around a lot too. The neighbor which I'm talking about owned a 2-story house next to my family's 1-story house. We lived in that house for a total of 3 years and then moved to a new neighborhood. During these 3 years, me and my brother rarely went outside. Our parents didn't like the idea. Besides, studying to them was a higher priority than anything else, as they were first-generation immigrants and preferred us to get a good education. Anyway, here's where things get interesting. Our parents decided to go to Los Angeles, California. Fine by us. We didn't quite care where we lived, although it was difficult to say goodbye to all of those friends. After having lived 2 years in California, my mom decided to sign me and my brother up for an acting camp. There, I attended the 13 and under class, while my brother attended the 13 and older class. One of the days, we had an exercise where 2 people would tell a story, one made up and one real. Me and another guy convinced the teacher to let us both tell a true story. The story I chose coincidentally took place the few times I went outside in that neighborhood which I lived in for 3 years. In the story, I, for some reason, named both the city and state I lived in as well as the neighborhood. One of the girls who was in my class had around 10 people, asked me after the fact came out that both stories were true. Firstly, she asked where I lived in that neighborhood. I told her right before the speed bump. Then she asked if my family grew things in our backyard, to which I replied that was true too. And lastly, she asked if I had gone outside with my brother to play before, and I replied that was true as well. And as such, I managed to meet my neighbor who I never knew until now across the country in a small acting camp in a class of roughly 10 students. At first, I couldn't believe it myself. Maybe I'd forgotten the actual name of the neighborhood and simply agreed with her because it sounded familiar. But everything she described was accurate. Her house was indeed 2 stories and ours 1. We did indeed live with our grandparents. Me and my brother did indeed go outside sometimes. The addresses matched. The city and states matched. Of course, I was pretty dumbfounded with such a coincidence. What are the odds that 2 kids' parents decide to move across the country to, albeit a popular city, to roughly the same region in the city and sign their children up the same year to the same small acting camp? And what are the odds that I tell that story out of the many which I could have told? And the odds that I listed the city and state where I lived? Oh, and the girl pretty blatantly tried to flirt with me during that class. Didn't particularly like her, but she definitely had a crush on me. Quite touchy, if you know what I mean. This is just some extra info at this point. When we did some games, she liked clinging to me or talking with me every chance she got. I was actually turning 13 very soon during that camp, and as such was far more mature than the 10 or 11-year-olds in that class. I still remember one girl sitting in my lap against my protests because she wanted to win a game. Boy, did I feel flustered then. Well, it's always cool to reflect on the past. Get that type of immaturity going again. Just thinking about it makes me think about luck and how awkward I was back then. Sad story from my life. I come back to school after the Christmas holidays, and we have a new girl in our class. We don't talk much at first, since she seems pretty introverted. Soon, she joins my friend group, and we start talking a lot more. I discover she's a gamer girl, and we transition into talking a lot on Discord, too. We talk a lot, sometimes 4 to 6 hours on calls until 2 a.m. I get to know her. She seems really nice, and I get an illusion that I might have a chance of dating her. We carry on being friends for a month with a small, insignificant argument here and there. about things like not caring about each other or not being honest when we annoy each other. We get pretty close and become best friends. She tells me things about her never having a crush, which is understandable since she's young and gets on better with boys than girls. Anyway, we kind of start arguing more frequently for stupid reasons. I admit I was responsible for about half, but once we get that far, she wants to end the friendship, and I go along. We have a pretty deep discussion ending in us realizing we can't replace each other and realizing we have to let go. She asked things like, "Why do you care for me?" So far, we've only been arguing online and acting normal or avoiding each other in real life. Well, that was about to change. The next morning, she messages me with the idea of, let's not talk over messages and just talk in real life, since everything's okay in real life. I go along since I don't want to lose her as a friend, and that argument was generally stupid. So everything goes normal for the next couple of weeks. In 1 week, it gets serious. It was a normal day at school. I came back home and I felt that things were different. We didn't talk much now because of the arguments. I really didn't enjoy being with her, and I decided to write her some message describing how attached I was, how two-faced she acted, acting normal in real life, but then saying dumb stuff in arguments, how much I didn't want to argue, and that something had to change. Well, it turned out to be a 960-word message. Her response was pathetic. Furthermore, I found out she was annoyed by me expressing my emotions. For time's sake, I can summarize her response. Okay, don't suppress your emotions. I didn't expect this. I expected some kind of understanding. Once again, one morning, we get into some argument. She explains her lack of interest as a lack of human emotion when I tried to understand what is wrong with her, like what I did wrong. I didn't understand why we didn't understand each other. Things were about to escalate. Right now, I feel clueless and very confused, not knowing what the best thing to do is. I keep messaging her and trying to figure things out, to understand her at the very least. We get to a very dodgy area. She starts saying things like, "You think I would ask for someone to care about me? No, I want everyone to forget about me, so I can finally effing kill myself without hurting anyone." That was when things started to head south. I took it as some sort of joke at first. She joked about suicide a lot before, but now I was a bit concerned. Later, she sends the message of, "You want to see my arm? Oh no, you will think it's an attention-seeking thing." I go along. She sends a pic of her arm scratched to near bleeding. As I later found out, it's not the first year of her doing this. Just before, it wasn't as severe. I felt bad like anyone would. The same day after school, I message her that I feel bad. I know it wasn't because of me, but the least I could have done is be there for you and not annoy you with arguments. My feelings didn't matter at that point because she was my best friend for a while and I wanted to help. We message a bit. She's very hostile. I want to help. She doesn't take it. I ask why she says it's none of my business. It was my business. If it wasn't, I wouldn't feel bad. She says, just because I showed you a picture of my arm, you don't have to start pretending you feel bad for me. Introduce SB, suicide buddy, or her now best friend. SB is a 13 to 14-year-old male that attempted suicide last year in the previous grade and is now her best friend. She said things like, because if I died, you wouldn't care. I just need to get my family to stop caring. Then, SB, then I can be free. Is that enough escalation? No? It's about to get much worse. From the previous conversation, I realized she was really suicidal or was trying to fake it. It seemed fake to me at the time because she had no reason to do it. She had friends, she had family. Turns out she had to go to a therapist a couple of years ago for the same reason. I still don't know. Probably those scratches were from a year ago. She tells me she's a very morbid person and there's nothing wrong. I start realizing that I can't help her. I'm clueless about what to do, so me, being the idiot I am, keep messaging her. It's us discussing how she was a B to me, and she's agreeing, discussing how she's very fake, and her incapability to feel human emotions like remorse, happiness, and love. I realize she's been through many things and that I am helpless, and nothing can change her past. The only thing that can be changed is her attitude. It's never late to start again. Trust people again, feel happy again. I explained this to her as a last-ditch attempt. Well, guess what? That only made her laugh, and it backfired on me. Backfired on me, you'd ask? Yes. We were discussing how I didn't know what led to this lifestyle when out of the blue she sends me an interesting image. An image of a girl ran over by a truck with all her vital organs just out in the open. I feel disgusted by just remembering it. She found it interesting from a biological point of view. Being very creeped out, I try to explain how she's not normal, how looking at those kinds of things isn't okay. I ask her, what if she was that girl? And this is what frightened me the most in her response. She said, what dies or experiences the pain? If I deserved the pain, I'd do it. The next couple of days was us arguing about her being sociopathic, feeding on people's emotions and having a lot in common with SB. SB is even more effed up than her. According to one of my friends, they watch strange types of hentai together. The next day, I come home to about 20 messages, reading something like, how do you want me to kill myself? I tell her I don't want her to die. I regret knowing her and that I hope she becomes normal, but without me being her best friend. This escalates to her sending more of those images, which I prefer not to describe. It's some not safe for life content. I don't know where she got them from, and I'm grateful she stopped sending them. Furthermore, it gets out of hand to the point where she begs me not to tell the school about it, because she doesn't want to go to a therapist again. 3 days later, last day of school before quarantine, we message under the table in class for a bit. I got some emotions out of her. I made her realize what kind of person she is, and she admitted. However, she is too weak to change and has adapted to this lifestyle. To conclude, what I'm left with is someone I wish I had never met in my friend group. Someone I had feelings for, but now every thought of her makes me feel disgusted. Thanks to the quarantine, I don't have to see her anytime soon. What do you guys think? White boys can't run. In 1966, when my Uncle Rob was a mere 10-year-old boy, he was well known for being a fast runner. According to my father, Uncle Rob wasn't just fast. He was without a doubt the fastest kid in town. However, my father is known to embellish. He also claims Eddie Murphy went to his school. Although he admits that the Eddie he knew was a tall Irish redheaded kid with freckles. He was always quick to point out lots of celebrities have had plastic surgery. Being the fastest kid in town was how Uncle Rob got his job as a paperboy. His boss concluded if he was fast on his feet, he'd be even faster on a bike. Uncle Rob would get on his bike, throw a paper on the steps, and take off to the next house. If he hit a puddle, he took off faster, which fortunately didn't happen much. When he needed to get paid at the end of each month, Uncle Rob would go door to door reminding customers who he was so they would pay him. Most of Uncle Rob's customers paid promptly without any hassles. However, the last house on the street was another story. It wasn't the last house. He only saved it last as they made him work for his paper money more than the others. In 1966, many black families didn't have the luxury of a paved driveway. Instead, they just had rather hard gravel all the way up and down the street. Hard to drive on, and even harder if you were riding a bike up the hill. But that wasn't the reason why Uncle Rob didn't like this house, although it didn't help getting there any faster. Uncle Rob will never forget the first day he went to collect from the owner of that house. When he got off his bike and walked to the door, someone was already waiting for him. She was a large black woman and was waiting for him when he came up the driveway on her porch. I always pictured her chewing because a big woman always looked more intimidating when they're chewing. Maybe it's because it instills fear that if you make them mad, you'll be the next thing they chew on, so it's best to stay on their good side. When he reached the front steps, she waddled down the porch stairs and looked him straight in the eyes. Clearing her throat, she said, "So, you're that white boy who can run fast." Yes, ma'am," Uncle Rob said, wondering where this was going. "Just how fast are you?" Pretty fast, I guess." "Can I see you run?" "Well, I really should be getting back to my route. I have more papers to deliver," he lied. "I just want to see you run. Then I'll pay you. Is that too much to ask?" "Well, okay, I guess I could." "Good. Now try and catch my son," she said, smiling. "What?" Uncle Rob asked, not sure if he'd heard her right. "My son, Whippy. I need you to catch him," she said as if it was a normal request. "Well, where is he?" "Right there." She pointed to Whippy, who was slouching by a tree. Whippy was well known in the neighborhood for being a little odd, and some kids said he wasn't all there. When playing baseball, he would run every base, whether he hit the ball or was tagged out. Either he didn't understand the game or didn't care. He just liked running. Uncle Rob looked at Whippy, who, unlike his mama, was skinny and about a year younger than him. Then he looked back at the mother. "I'm not sure I understand. Your son's right there. Why should I have to catch him for you?" Whippy's mother smiled and turned to her son and hollered, "Whippy, take off!" Hearing that, Whippy bolted off as if he were on fire and took off running down the street. Whippy's mother then turned back to my Uncle Rob and smiled wider. "You want to get paid? Let me see you catch my son. We'll see who's faster." Uncle Rob looked at Whippy's mother and saw that she was dead serious. "Can I use my bike?" he asked. "Nope, that defeats the purpose. You gotta catch him on foot," she said. "Of course I do," Uncle Rob mumbled. So Uncle Rob took off after Whippy. Maybe his adrenaline kicked in, or maybe he realized it was easier to catch Whippy rather than arguing with a crazy woman. In any case, the chase was on. Whippy didn't make things easy. He didn't just run fast. He ran between every fence post, jumped every bush, and sprinted around every tree he could find like an obstacle course. If there was ever a kid who'd try and make Billy from the family circus jealous, Whippy was that kid. Eventually, Uncle Rob did catch him, and by catch I mean tagged him on the back. He wasn't about to tackle Whippy to the ground. He was a runner, not a football player. Satisfied, Whippy's mother paid Uncle Rob. As he picked up his bike, Whippy's mother called out, "See you next month." Uncle Rob's stomach lurched. There was something in the way after she said next month that let him know this wasn't just a one-time thing. Sure enough, when the next month came, Whippy and his mother were both waiting for him. This time, Whippy jumped off the porch the moment Uncle Rob's bike hit the ground. So again, Uncle Rob took off after him, and again, he managed to catch him. It was the same thing the following month, and the month after that. Eventually, Uncle Rob settled into a routine. He'd ride up the unpaved driveway, put his bike down, look at Whippy's mother and say, I know, I've got to catch Whippy," then take off running after Whippy. It's hard to say who enjoyed this more, Whippy's mother, who clearly got a lot of entertainment out of watching Uncle Rob run, or Whippy, who enjoyed making this difficult as much as was possible. Uncle Rob complained about this to his boss and parents, but his boss didn't think it was a problem. "So you have to run for your money. You're the fastest kid in town. You shouldn't be that hard to catch," his boss said. As for Uncle Rob's parents, they were too busy laughing to give any sound advice on the matter. Having no luck with his complaints, he gave up and continued with the monthly Whippy chase for a year. Eventually, he got sick of it and quit the newspaper route. I can't say if Whippy and his mother played the strange game with the new paper boy. Not that they wouldn't still have enjoyed it, given their weird sense of humor. But we have no way of knowing, as Uncle Rob never saw them again. Years later, Uncle Rob went on to run track in high school. Seems the Whippy chasing did some good after all. This is one of my dad's favorite childhood stories. Strangely, Uncle Rob doesn't share this sentiment. He won't talk about the story when we ask about it, not the way my dad does. None of us know where Whippy and his mother are now, or if they have their own version of this story they tell with their children and grandchildren. If they are out there, I'd like to thank them for making me laugh and giving us such a great story to tell. Be careful what you wish for. I was pretty much effed from the start. My father was a really effed up person, like molested as a child, and a Marine during Vietnam. Into every drug you can imagine, and drank like a fish. My mom was very smart, but also horribly effed up by her childhood. She was the oldest of 3 kids and had to help work and take care of the other 2 when her dad split. I was born on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. The odd thing to me is that I remember my first birthday party, and then nothing else at all until I was about 5 or 6. My dad was always in and out of the scene. Here today, gone by tomorrow. My mom was trying her best as a semi-single parent. By this time, she had become an OBGYN. Don't really remember when, but we moved to Alabama at some point. During one of the times my dad was actually around, he ended up blowing the back of his foot off with a shotgun. He was taking it back to the pawn shop he bought it from and was pulling the slide back to see if it was loaded, which, of course it was, and fired while resting it on his heel. And from here, the long, downward spiral begins. One of the earliest memories after my first birthday party is my mom going to pick deadbeat dad up from living in the bushes behind McDonald's. He was taken by helicopter to the University of Alabama hospital for hours and hours of reconstructive surgery. After a couple of weeks, he was sent home in a cast, which always struck me as odd. The wound ended up getting infected. And very long story short, they had to amputate just below the knee. Get a wonderfully terrible prosthetic paid for by the good old VA, which never fit right. He was in constant pain for the rest of his life. He always had very bad phantom limb syndrome and ended up, by the time everything was said and done, taking methadone for pain management. My mom ends up getting a job offer with the state of Tennessee, so we move again. Everything goes all right for a while in a little private school in the area, basically raising myself since my parents had no idea how to raise a child and had tons of their own crap going on. We stayed stable for a couple of years before he took off again. We had to sell the property we owned and move into an apartment. She's still doing OB, and now I'm getting drugged to the hospital at all hours of the night if she has to go in. My dad shows back up, and we move into this crappy ancient house. During this time, the magical drug called Stadol came out on the market. Supposed to be a non-addictive narcotic, which it absolutely wasn't. My mom came across it because they were pushing it for use in labor pain. She ended up writing a bunch of prescriptions for it for my dad, which of course got her in hot water pretty quick, but not before my dad, my mom, and myself at the ripe old age of 12 were addicted to it. The local medical people she worked with figured it out. She lost her license and got in trouble with the DEA. So she's effectively out of a career, and my dad has never brought any money in. So overnight we go from an upper middle class family to completely broke, living in low income housing. After about another 2 years, my dad kills himself by taking an entire bottle of his methadone. Was having seizures and some other issues by this point as well. I remember the night it happened. I had gotten carted over to my grandparents for the night. I had an idea that something was up, but no idea what was going on. About 2 a.m, the phone rings. As soon as that first ring wakes me up, I knew exactly what had happened. A few minutes later, my grandfather takes off. After another couple of hours, the phone rings again, and it's official. So at 15, I get to see my dad's cooling corpse. During the time he was still alive, and for a while after he died, we moved all over the place with my mom, trying to get around her past DEA issues or trying to find other work. By the time I was 18, I'd lived in every single state in the Southeast. After my dad died, I started doing some work here and there to help bring in some money, and ended up working at a little computer shop in the town we lived in. I ended up homeschooling through high school. We were always moving, so there really wasn't an opportunity for a real school. Homeschooling is in quotes because I wasn't really doing the work anyway. Ended up taking my GED to get out a year early. Started working full-time in tech at that point. About this time, my mom gets diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 cervical cancer. Over the next 2 years, I spend most of my time either in or driving to and from hospitals, doctors, chemo, all manners of crap, while watching my mother slowly wither and die. A few months before her death, I took a job back in Alabama, so now I'm driving every weekend back and forth from Tennessee to Alabama. I remember the night she finally passed. I got the call about midday that I needed to get up there, so I jump in the car and book it. When I finally got there, she looked like she was dead already. If you ever saw any of the pictures of Terry Schiavo, that's pretty much what she looked like. To this day, I can't really close my eyes without seeing her like that. Within 3 years of that, I got to do it again the exact same way, first with my grandmother, then my grandfather. All the people back and forth to the doctors, watching them slowly wither, getting to be the only one there when they died. I started drinking really heavily after that, going through hundreds of dollars worth of liquor in an evening, and found not only a completely drained bottle of vodka, but one of Everclear as well. I never had time for a childhood or a teenagehood. I never had a first date, never had a first kiss, a first love. Just got taken straight from infant to fending for myself. I focused on my job and woke up one morning to discover I'd gotten my biggest goal from childhood. I wanted to be the guy running the tech department in a big national company, traveling all over, riding elevator up to my office every day. Well, I got it, and realized I had sacrificed absolutely everything to get it. So now, I'm all alone. I don't believe I could ever attract a mate. I'm burned out. I hate my job. I hate my life, if you can call it that. I hate dealing with people. I hate even the interaction required to go to the store. I'd be a complete shut-in if I can manage it. But at the same time, so lonely and sad that I never learned how to actually interact with people or have a social life. I never go out socially at all, so I have pretty much no chance of ever finding someone. I'm just so tired of life, of being alone, of never having any emotional or physical contact with another human being. Tired of being out of sync with the rest of the world. Tired of being the 35-year-old virgin. Tired of being me. Just can't figure out why I keep getting up in the morning and doing the same things over and over again. Be careful what you wish for. You may just get it in the most unsatisfying way possible.